Mike Hill here. It's been a while since the last episode, and I promise you that there's a valid excuse for all of this. Before we get going, I just want to talk about some of the changes that are coming up. I've been hired to host and produce the new Gimme Radio podcast, which is going to be launching in November. So the last 6 weeks or so, I've been busy producing content for them at the expense of Everything Went Black. But, just ramping up, getting things together. And I just want to give you guys a rundown on what that all is going to mean to us. So the topic episodes, which feature me and Randy Larson getting deep into other music-related topics, is now going to be part of the Gimme Radio platform. So if you're interested in hearing me and Randy talk about Iron Maiden, Amphetamine Reptile Records, Henry Rollins and Black Flag and all that sort of stuff, and checking out playlists that we're developing, you will be able to find that on the Gimme Radio podcast, which is going to be launching in November. So I'll be letting everyone know when that's going to go live. And if you guys can all do me a favor and subscribe when that stuff starts hitting the road, and I would much appreciate that. So you'll be able to check out me and Randy on Gimme Radio podcast starting in November. And in addition to that, I'm also going to be doing interview episodes where I have guests. And some of the guests we had, I have Aaron Turner, Steve Brodsky, Dan Lilker, Dwid from Integrity, Pig Destroyer. All that stuff's in the can right now and awaiting release. So yeah, I'll let everyone know. If you follow me on social media, you guys will get, updates on all that stuff, and I'll talk about it on this podcast as well. So I'm real excited about it. Not sure if all of you know, but I'm also a DJ on Gimme Radio, and twice a month I have a playlist that goes up, and you get to hear me put together some of the tracks I've been into, and me riffing on how that stuff is meaningful to me or whatever. So also, if you haven't checked out the Gimme Radio app, it's something you can stream on your phone, and a lot of really cool, exciting news going on in that world. And I'm real happy to be part of that group. Really good bunch of people, and looking forward to moving into the future with those guys. So now here at Everything Went Black, like I said, the topic episodes will now be part of Gimme. The regular episodes, it's all just going to be Everything Went Black. I'm not going to differentiate between Man of the Silver Mountain and the regular Everything Went Black episodes where I have guests. It's all just going to be one thing, sequentially on into infinity. So this is the first episode of the solo series on Everything Went Black, and it's just going to be me checking in with you guys, talking about what I've been up to and why I've been sort of radio silent for the last 6 weeks. The last episode was with Ben over at Metal Sucks, and that was a great time. Definitely a eye-opening experience talking to that guy. He was a lot different than I thought he would be, and I'm sure we've met at some point over the past several years, but I don't have any recollection of ever meeting Ben before, and he was a super cool guy. Though we don't agree on everything, I feel like that we found a common ground, at least to agree on some things. And, he wasn't the villain that I thought he was. So there you go. You guys probably disagree with a lot of the stuff I just said about Ben, but, that's the beauty of this society we live in, where we can all have our own opinions. And, that's something that I will defend that till the day I die, is being able to have your own opinion and speak freely. That's what this is all about. So recently, we just wrapped up a few dates with Eyehategod and The Obsessed, and really cool time. It was only 2 shows. Hopefully we'll be doing more stuff together down the line, and just really intense band. One of my favorites, and actually, speaking of Eyehategod, that's a band that's definitely had its ups and downs. I think I started listening to them back in 1995. With their first 2 records, In the Name of Suffering and Take As Needed for Pain. That was, I think, the only records they had out at the time. And the thing that hit me immediately about them was how they didn't really sound like anything I'd ever heard before. I mean, sure, the sort of easy comparisons would be, oh yeah, man, these guys are into Sabbath. Sure. Yeah, there's like a heavy blues Sabbathy thing going on. But the deeper you get into the band and you kind of submerge yourself into the imagery and the vibe and just the lyrical content and just, the whole atmosphere of the band, it's it's way different, I think. In some ways, I feel like Eyehategod is a punk band because of just the sort of anti-establishment, anti-cop, anti-government vibe that the band has, and just the side 2 of My War influence on their whole sound. A lot of times people would say the same thing about the Melvins, how it was like, oh yeah, the Melvins are just a Black Sabbath sort of disciple, but in reality, if you know anything about punk and old school punk music and hardcore, you'll see that the Melvins also are a band that is heavily influenced more by bands like Flipper and the slower Black Flag sort of material. So when I listen to Eyehategod, I don't really hear the Sabbath. The first thing I hear is like side 2 of My War, Black Flag, Nothing Left Inside, Scream, Damaged 2, super noisy, discordant, very intense lyrics, just like an overall nihilistic sort of viewpoint. And then I hear the blues element, which 100% comes from Sabbath Volume 4. The first 4 Sabbath records are definitely an influence on those guys. But the sort of, atmosphere, I think, is more of like a punk atmosphere. And then, of course, live, you have to give respect where respect is due to Mr. G.G. Allen. I think that Mike Williams will undoubtedly give props to Gigi as an influence. And I've spoken to Mike on this at some length. A while back, there was a piece I wrote for Revolver for Gigi Allen's birthday, which included a little excerpt of something that Mike sent me to be included in the article about how much of an influence Gigi was on the early Eyehategod, and how Eyehategod, some of the earlier shows are opening for Gigi Allen, which, if you can imagine that's like a mind-blowing thing as well. I mean, just imagine seeing Gigi Allen with Eyehategod as the opening band. It's amazing. But as I said, it's a band that's had its ups and downs. Member changes, original drummer Joey dying a number of years ago, Mike's incarceration, Brian Patton, the second guitar player, quitting. I guess Gary has more or less been their solid bass player for several years now, but I remember every time I saw Eyehategod through the 90s, there was a different guy on bass. But yet they persevered and they kept going. And, I find a lot of inspiration in that. And a band that's been able to weather the storm and kind of keep it together despite all of these obstacles that have been put in their way. Some of these obstacles arguably have been self-created, but nonetheless, they were able to survive and overcome. And, and even like fan reactions to the band. It's like, in the early days, in the early 90s, I saw Eyehategod play in front of maybe 30 or 40 people. They were a very obscure band at that point. Then in the late 90s, they had a pretty big peak. Then they kind of faded away. And now they're enjoying a renaissance of new fans, which I noticed at the shows that we just played with them. There was a lot of young people at the show that probably were not around when the band first had its run. Back in the early 90s, a lot of these kids, I feel like, were probably about 8 or 9 years old. So, they definitely didn't see them back in the 90s. So that really gives me a lot of hope in younger people, because being an old man like myself, I get very cynical about young people and seeing the things they're into. And, the kind of weak ass music that they're into, and the sort of lack of commitment and that kind of thing, lack of heart. Like a lot of times I see young people and these are the feelings I get. But then have an experience like this past weekend where there's a lot of like, there's a new crowd that's like into this band that I consider to be, an old school band that's inspirational. So it was cool. I had a good time. And, I feel like I'm just starting to get to know those guys on a personal level. Just once again, being a fan, I was very reluctant to approach people, I know how I never want to come off as just like a fanboy. So, in a way, I feel like having played so many dates together over the years, it sort of has given me this kind of disclaimer to be able to like be more friendly with the band. So, that's all. That's my personal hang up, I guess. But yeah, just like a bunch of guys that are real easy to be on the road with. They crush every night. And it was just it's an overall cool vibe, even though it was only 2 days. Also on the bill was The Obsessed, which, for those of you, shame on you if you don't know that The Obsessed features Wino. One of the most prolific and influential contributors to the American heavy rock scene. Wino is like, the term lifer, I believe, was coined to describe Wino's involvement in music. He's just a guy that's been around for a long time, doing the only thing he seems to know how to do, which is write heavy rock music and tour. So it was definitely a bucket list thing for me to play with The Obsessed. It's a band whose roots go all the way back to the late 70s, and were active in the hardcore scene, believe it or not. Some of their earlier shows around the DC area were with bands like like Black Flag, Minor Threat. They were definitely these weird long-haired guys playing hard rock music in front of hardcore kids. And I think it was probably a long journey for them to actually find their audience. And once again, it's another band, another guy who's had its ups and downs, who's had successes and failures, trials, obstacles. A lot of those obstacles were definitely created by himself, but also he's shown the gusto to overcome these things. So once again, it was just like a really cool time being able to be on the road with both of these bands, even if it was just for 2 days. So I find myself, in awe of them, and feel very fortunate to have been part of that weekend. So yeah, it was a good time. And like I said, look forward to hopefully being able to do more work with these guys out on the road. Back to Eyehategod, one of the probably, if you were to press me to ask and tell me pose the question to me, what was the best show you've ever seen in your life? I would have to say that it was Neurosis, Eyehategod, and Dead and Gone in 1997 at the Middle East Downstairs. And I actually told Mike about this night, and he was like, I remember that show, I remember that tour. It was like Neurosis were at the top of their game. It was the Through Silver and Blood era of the band. They were out supporting that record. And Eyehategod was on the bill as well on this tour. And the opening band, Dead and Gone, who, if anyone who's been listening to this podcast or is familiar with my DJ sets over at Gimme, anyone who's been familiar with those things will know how much I love that band. But that was the first time I heard them opening for that tour. And I was like, wow, this is like definitely some really cool stuff. And I went out to the merch table and I bought their current record, which was God Loves Everybody But You. When I saw that title, I felt like God loves everyone but me, because I was going through an incredibly difficult time in my life. For all intents and purposes, I was homeless. I was living on the couch with some friends, temporarily, I guess, pretty much living out of a gym bag, sleeping on the couch every night, and no it was a very dark period. You know, not a lot of positive things were going on in my life at the time. So then this Neurosis, Eyehategod and Gone show comes through town, and I'm like, yeah, I got to go to this thing. And I think that was the best I'd ever seen Eyehategod perform. I mean, they were just like this wave of dark intensity coming off the stage. And, you know, just Mike was breaking bottles and like cutting himself and like throwing stuff at the audience. And it was just like this chaos was, it felt like anything could happen that night with them playing. And, you know, I literally felt like I was in danger at some point. You know, and that sort of energy coming off the stage was definitely affecting the crowd, and everyone was like in this like real heavy vibe. And you know, after they were done playing, I was like, man, who's going to come on after this? And you know, who's going to follow something like that? You know, I wonder if every night was like that, this total destructive force of like violence, depression, and just pain. I wonder if every single night was like that for those guys, because I can't imagine playing 30 straight nights doing that every day. So the answer to that question is, who can follow that? The answer obviously is Neurosis, and that was probably the best Neurosis set I'd ever seen that night as well. So I got to see two of my favorite bands perform two of their best sets in their entire career that night, at least from my perspective. And yeah, it was just like an overall transcendent evening for me. And I remember, you know, the song Locust Star being played by Neurosis and feeling like that, you know, maybe tomorrow would be a better day than today, and that maybe like going on was an option as opposed to just ending it, you know, because that was definitely during that period of time, those thoughts were entering my head about, you know, taking my own life and like just ending all this pain that I was feeling. And you know, that set made me feel like that was not an option, and that to go on and keep moving forward was the way to go, as opposed to just taking the failure way out. And yeah, that was like one of those nights, man. And you know, it was just I'll keep going back to that show when I talk about these two bands, because it was like a very, very important evening for me. So anyway, enough of that. I'm real excited because the fall is here slowly. We're starting to get this fall weather. And even though the last couple of days have been brutally hot and humid, you can still get glimpses of autumn. And that means that Halloween is around the corner, which is my favorite time of year. And we got a new Halloween film coming out, which I'm excited about seeing. We got Suspiria, which is coming out. And you know, for those of you who like horror movies, you can head over to my other horror podcast called Necromaniacs, which I do with Mike Scandato, and we'll be covering the oncoming Halloween season by talking about those films in future episodes. So that, you know, once again, that was another podcast that kind of went a little bit on a hiatus while I was gearing up for all this gimme stuff. So you know, we'll be rocking and rolling with that again soon, and you know, getting back into the swing. Hopefully the goal is to start putting out 2 episodes a month of that podcast. So, you know, me and Mike have been organizing ourselves, coming up with show ideas, and, you know, hopefully going to try to take this thing a little bit more seriously and just be more diligent about getting content out there to you guys. And so yeah, I mean, the intro and outro tracks for this episode reflect my mood about the onset of autumn and the mightiest season of our 4 seasons, I believe, is autumn. And I'm fully looking forward to jumping into the darkness of autumn and Halloween and just feeling the changing seasons. And so yeah, anyway, I just wanted to get at you guys real quick and let you guys know what's going on. And got a bunch of cool stuff planned for the next few weeks, so stay tuned, and we'll be getting more stuff out there to you guys. And see you guys out on the road. Take care.
To walk the night, to feel no